All right, we're back, and some big news popped up. Bobby Lashley, he's officially leaving. Or he's very close to. He's been now listed off internally off WWE's roster page. Same with MVP. And let me just give you the automatic reaction to this, the automatic quick feeling. I'm just gonna be honest. I'm upset. This sucks. I think for most people this sucks. I think nobody wanted Bobby Lashley to be gone. I think we all like Bobby Lashley. But let's just get to it. All right, why did this happen? And who should be blamed? Fundamentally speaking, Bobby has not been over in a profound way with the fans with WWE in a long time. He's still very over. He still gets a very good pop. The fans absolutely love him. I mean, he's still revered, and that's why there's a lot of disappointment around this decision. But there's no chance in hell Bobby's been really over, or he's had anything over in the last 2 years since Triple H has taken charge. That's the truth. So who's going to be blamed for this, ultimately speaking? Before Triple H, Bobby was a champion. He was a world champion. And he was being pushed, and he was being looked at as one, and he was being pretty much moved up as a top guy within the company. Why did this end? This has ended because of one thing and one thing only. That ended because of Roman Reigns. The Roman Reigns push, the 4-year-long push of Roman Reigns. Or much longer than 4 years, but the last 4-year push of Roman Reigns. And in order for Roman to get both titles, I believe Brock Lesnar ended up beating Bobby. He ended up taking Bobby's title off him, and it ended up being Brock versus Roman. Roman obviously unified the titles, and we were stuck with him with the unified titles for a couple years. This destroyed Bobby Lashley's push. And once again, this just goes back to a point I was trying to harbor in a couple videos ago. The Bloodline storyline has destroyed pushes for wrestlers. I mean, this is crazy. This is crazy. This is just another example, and I thought it was super ironic after that video came out, that this is just another example of somebody who, yeah, I mean, sure, he could be on the roster. Like, Bobby Lashley could totally be on the roster. And there's even a report coming out that Triple H and company offered him, I think they kind of lowballed him, but still, they offered him a contract. So they offered him something to stay. Bobby, by all accounts, actually wants to leave. This sounds like it's coming from Bobby's end. The murmurings were already coming out with MVP and how he was already kind of on the fence and how he was departing and how he was having issues with creative. And this kind of makes sense now. This is all kind of co-signs, it kind of wraps it all up. And Bobby's going to leave too, because Bobby's also having similar issues with creative. The thing with Bobby is he's kind of got at least some pushes. We know he had the Street Profits thing, but that shit was horrible. That shit was horrible. And the reason it was horrible is because they were supposed to be a heel group. That was supposed to be a heel faction. That did not end up being a heel faction. It did end up being a heel faction. Not only was it not a heel faction, it was a jobber faction. Their only beef, the only feud they had was with another jobber faction, the Final Testament. So this is pretty upsetting. I mean, when you think about it, it failed. But why did that fail? It failed profoundly because, not because Bobby can actually play the role of a heel. There was some issues with it. Now I don't, I think every single time he came out, they just kept cheering him for some reason, even if he tried to act like a heel. But ultimately speaking, with Bobby, and the Street Profits, they were just treated like faces, and they're kind of treated like jokes, especially by the fans. The fans don't take the Street Profits seriously. So, nobody does. Nobody takes Montez Ford seriously. No, even when they tried to wear the suits. And let's just be honest, it failed because they didn't go all the way in with the feud, or didn't go all the way in with the push. If they wanted to be heels, profoundly speaking, they needed to act extremely heelish, and they had to go over the top to do so. And WWE didn't do that. So, from WWE's perspective, that's a failure. From Triple H's perspective, from a creative perspective, that's a giant failure. They didn't go all the way in. I don't remember a single moment where that group just destroyed people like the current Bloodline does. The current Bloodline is just destroying people and putting them through announce tables every week. They didn't do anything remotely similar to that. They should have went after the most babyface person on the roster and just made an example out of them several times over again. And instead, they never did that at any point. And it kind of showed. I mean, every single time they came out, people were kind of cheering them. They went from small boo to a tweener to a face in a matter of 3 weeks. It was a joke. But that's also because the Street Profits are kind of an unserious group. No one's willing to boo them because they're just too jokative and they're not serious. Either way, that kind of subsided for Bobby, and it led to him just having that WrestleMania match at the Final Testament, which is horrible, horrible stuff. And the only reason they did that was because they felt bad for Bobby. I don't think they were gonna do him 2 years in a row off the card. Remember, they're trying to re-sign him currently. They were trying to re-sign him. He's leaving on his own accord. So WWE still does value him to a certain extent, but the reason they gave him that match was because they didn't want to do it 2 years in a row with no match. And then on top of it, Triple H, he kind of made him into a little nerd. Like, he kind of made Bobby into a nerd. I remember Bobby won the Andre the Giant Battle Royal, and the next night at WrestleMania, he's like, look at me with my trophy, and he's like holding it up. Oh my God. Making him look like a goddamn nerd. It was terrible. It's like a geek. Looking so geeky. Look at my trophy, I won this on SmackDown the other day. Like, why? Why are we doing that? I feel bad for Bobby in that sense. His momentum has been squandered, mostly speaking. Let's just be honest. Now, like I said, he hasn't gotten himself over, and he hasn't gotten his groups over, but his momentum got squandered because of Roman Reigns' push. Just like pretty much everyone else on the roster. Everyone else in the roster, his momentum is getting held back because of the bloodline, because of Roman Reigns' push. He killed Bobby's cool factor too, Triple H. I mean, that was the other thing. He kind of killed his cool factor. But ultimately speaking, pairing him with the Street Profits was not going to ever be something that worked long term. Especially if the idea was that they were going to be heels. You know, I guess that never really was. And if you were going to do that, you just had to be more profound about it. And they never were. They never went all in. They just said, like, whatever. It's fine. But it's just, again, we're just going to go back, and I'll finish up here. The Bloodline storyline is holding people back. It is holding the show back. It's holding other people's momentum back. LA Knight the other day, LA Knight's beginning, it's starting, it's not the beginning of the end, but it's starting to feel like the beginning of the end of LA Knight. Because he got buried by Logan Paul, a guy that Triple H absolutely values. Absolutely values. He loves Logan Paul. All right? He loves Roman Reigns. He loves the Bloodline. But he loves Logan Paul. And he let LA Knight get destroyed the other day on on SmackDown. And LA Knight, too. I mean, think about him. He's someone who was actually able to get himself momentum during this tough period with the Bloodline. And it's just been squattered down. Everything's been just watered down. And it's... You kind of see it. You kind of see it more and more and more. I hope Triple H begins to kind of think about the Bloodline, you know, in a different perspective, in a different priority after SummerSlam. Because if the Bloodline continues to just be the main part of SmackDown and every single week, the only progression occurs with the Bloodline and nobody else's storylines, then this is going to be a constant theme. We're gonna have so many more Bobby Lashley type departures very soon, because eventually people are just going to get kind of, you know, upset and kind of tired, because it's the same cast. We're working with the same cast of people. Triple H is only willing to push the same small cast, which is a good thing, but it definitely has its limitations. In terms of what I think is going to happen to Bobby next, I'm kind of in the fence. So a lot of people think, all right, he's going to rebuild the Hurt Business, and MVP and Shelton potentially, and that's kind of been the idea floated around. They're going to take the Hurt Business and take it to another promotion, take it to AEW. All right. Well, how do I feel about that? That's going to fail. So there is no feasible outcome for Bobby Lashley at AEW. There's no dream matches. There's no scenarios that I really care to see. There's nothing there for him really at AEW. I'm just going to be perfectly honest. I don't think there's anyone there that sure, there's like one-off matches. You'd love to see him go against certain people. Like, I'd like to see him go against Warlord, for example. Or Powerhouse Hobbs. Like, I don't know. But, you know, even then, those are just one-off scenarios. Like, they're not really things that, like, I care for long term. Like, it's not something that's, like, profoundly interesting. So for Bobby, you know, you could say, oh, he could rebuild the Hurt Business and Trios Championship and the Patriarchy. No, that's boring. No one cares. That's just some collision shit. No one cares. I kind of think, and the only reason why I think this is going to be potentially not feasible is due to the current existing relationship between TNA and NXT and WWE, but I think TNA is the better fit. I think he actually would be much better off at TNA. I think if you went to TNA, Bobby Lashley would be the face of the whole brand almost instantaneously. Instantaneously, they give him back the title. I think he was a TNA World Champion way back ago. And they'd give him back the title. And it would make perfect sense. He could run dominant. They also have a roster that kind of makes way more sense for him, especially in their main event scene. AEW is like, I don't know, it's a very indie-type wrestling show. It's like an indie fed. It's a really, really indie show. And I don't know if a guy like Bobby, you know, and his look and his build and the way he wrestles is actually really meant for that type of show. A couple one-off matches, like, I'm sure would be fun, but even then, AEW hates big guys. AEW is disgraceful when it comes to using big guys. They suck at using big guys. I don't know if a person like Bobby Lashley benefits in any capacity being on AEW. Seriously. They don't know how to push any of their big guys. Only small men under 6 feet and usually under 200 pounds are being pushed and are usually the main champions. It's pretty rare for their I mean, that's not necessarily true always, but it's for the most of the roster. It's pretty rare for someone like Bobby, especially, he's taller, but he's on the bigger side. I mean, he's a unit. I don't know how he'd be booked. Imagine Bobby Lashley losing to someone like honestly, like MJF. MJF is considerably smaller than him. That's it just doesn't look good. It doesn't look right. It doesn't fit Bobby. He doesn't fit that scene. If anything, building back the Hurt Business to TNA and doing it in a way that could really make waves within that company, and then eventually using that relationship with WWE to maybe take it back and bring back the Hurt Business to WWE, that sounds like a way more profound storyline, and it sounds way more for and that's a long-term thing, and that's really hypothetical, but that's way more interesting than having Bobby just go to AEW, and we know what's going to happen to him. He's going to be Miro. It's just going to be Miro. So it's just going to be Miro 2.0, a Cesaro 2.0, Claudio Castagnoli. It's same thing. It's going to be the same thing. It's going to be disgraceful. So for Bobby, if anything, I'd actually rather see him go to TNA, to be honest.